real pretty, but it's better than I left it. Y'all like this better or worse than the press room? Or do you even care?
Which do you prefer? You're the boss.
Well, you think? Well, thank y'all for being here. I'll take some questions in just a moment, but I wanted to tell you that as instructed by me today, the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources filed an intervention in 39 coastal damage lawsuits that have been filed in 3 parishes. Those parishes are Plaquemines, Plaquemines, Jefferson, and Cameron, to make sure that the interests of the state of Louisiana are fully protected, and that all coastal stakeholders are now at the table. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Attorney General and the parishes to bring this matter to a successful resolution. And so with that, I offered that up because I didn't think you all would know to ask that question. The rest of what we'll talk about will depend on what y'all want to ask.
Trevor, can I ask on the Medicaid copay bills
Yeah.
that were up in House Hall and Walter this morning? I'm assuming you knew that they were going to be pulled from consideration. Are you trying to negotiate with the healthcare providers on bringing some version of that back this session, or is that as far as concerned?
Well, there were many bills that were set for the meeting today. Only one was mine. That was McFarland's bill. And quite frankly, on a bipartisan basis, we lacked the support for the bill for copays. And we knew that, and so rather than moving forward, we pulled it, and we're going to continue to discuss this matter, not just with providers, but yes, with providers and members of the legislature. As you know, it was part of my plan to have copays in the Medicaid expansion in order to make sure that the expansion population, to some degree, were incentivized to go to primary care physicians and not continue to receive routine care in hospital emergency rooms, but also as a way to promote personal responsibility and get a little skin in the game, as some people would like to say. That's not a phrase that I would often use. And quite frankly, early on, I was in my communications with a number of folks in the House and the Senate. That was something that they really wanted me to include in the plan. And so it appears now, at least to some, it's not as important as it used to be. I still think it's the right thing to do, but so we're going to move forward and try to see if there's a way to do it. But at the same time, if the support isn't there, then it's not there. And I am aware, Melinda, that in some circumstances, the copay actually operates as the functional equivalent of a reimbursement cut to the providers. Because if this population doesn't pay it and can't pay it, then the service is still going to be provided to them, but the providers would have to eat that loss of the copay.
And you were okay with that, the way that can play out?
Well, I want the bill to pass, but in terms of whether Jack should have pulled it today, I do support that because he didn't have the votes on that committee, either from the Republicans or from the Democrats, to pass it.
But, I mean, you're okay with the still out effect of the possibility of being equivalent of a rate cut to these providers?
Yeah, I'm not okay with it, but that's just how the law operates, and you got to make tough decisions. And I'm trying to promote as much individual responsibility as possible. And also, I understand that for many people in the expansion population, they have received, as uninsured folks, sometimes for multiple generations now, they have received their care primarily at hospitals, which we all know an emergency room is the most costly way to receive health care, and it's also the least effective way to manage somebody's health. And so the copay for me is a way to not just promote individual responsibility, but just to change behavior. that is learned. I mean, and so I still think it's the right thing to do, and we're going to continue to work towards getting the bill passed. But I offered that up as saying I understand why there is some opposition to it, and because like everything else we do, there are two sides to every coin.
Tell me, will there still be an announcement of some cuts tomorrow? And if not, why not?
Well, the reason why not is because Jay Darden's appearance in front of the Appropriations Committee was moved from Friday to Tuesday. And the announcement will come as he makes his presentation to the Appropriations Committee.
Governor, equal pay comes up
Yeah.
Tuesday. There's a lot of fanfare around it. I think you're speaking to a luncheon some support. What's your sense of where that stands?
Well, I believe we're going to pass equal pay out of the Senate and get it to the House. Look, it's really not a difficult issue to understand. We're dead last in the country. We're 51st because if you have to include the District of Columbia in there too. At 65 cents on the dollar on average. And on average, women of color in Louisiana earn less than 50 cents on the dollar when compared to the wages of men doing the same work. And we have to fix that. I mean, that's another bad list that we should not be at the top of, and clearly whatever measures we have in place on the books in Louisiana are not sufficient to do the job. And this is a very carefully crafted bill that allows the employers the benefit of written notice from an employee who believes that the employer is in violation of the law, and then gives them 60 days to investigate it and rectify it before anything else can go forward. And if they do that, there is no back pay involved either. And the next step after that is not a lawsuit. So I believe it's a very carefully crafted bill to do some good and make it as I guess in terms of being onerous to the employers, it is designed to make sure that it is not overly burdensome there too. Just trying to promote good behavior from employers, many of whom may not realize, by the way, that there is a pay differential.
Yeah, NFIB and Lobby are still against it.
Well, you'd have to ask why they're against it. It doesn't make sense to me. The climate in Louisiana, it takes into consideration a lot of things, and the fact that we're dead last in the country, that's not good for business either. And I suspect many of the good people at Lobby have wives and daughters, and mothers and aunts, and they shouldn't consign them to a fate of having to work for 65 cents on the dollar. Yes, sir.
Senator Jack Donahue's TOPS bill passed today. Could you restate why you supported that bill that you're hoping it will accomplish?
Well, first of all, we know that what started off as a program that cost about $60 million a year at its inception, if we were to fully fund it in the next fiscal year, it's $300 million. Now, that growth has been explosive and primarily attributable to the tuition increases that have happened over the last 8 or 9 years, primarily under the GRAD Act. But those tuition increases have grown the cost of that program, quite frankly, to where it's not sustainable. And so it seems that the very least thing that we should do is separate the cost of TOPS from future tuition increases. That doesn't mean that they're forever separated. At any point in the future, should the state have the money and the legislature want to do it, the legislature can vote to increase the appropriation for TOPS to cover some or all of that additional differential. So I think it's the right thing to do. Clearly, it's not what I would like to do. I wish it weren't necessary. But under the circumstances, when you, and I know I keep going back to this, but it drives so much of what we're doing these days. And when you have the largest budget deficit in the history of the state, and look, we did some good work in the special session, but we're still $750 million short. And understanding that only $60 million of TOPS is funded by the tobacco settlement, and the rest is funded by state general fund. So that's $240 million of a $300 billion program is state general fund. You just can't continue to fund those things when you're that short. And so you have to make decisions that are hard decisions, but ultimately in everyone's best interest. And so I will, just like I voted for the bill last year, I will sign the bill this year, and I do expect that to pass.
So, do you expect to be able to fully fund TOP for next year? And if you can't, can you explain whether you prefer a cut that raises the ACT score, raises the qualifications, or what we've seen Senator Morrish and Representative Landry are proposing, kind of
Yeah.
across the board?
Well, first of all, you are not going to see a proposal from us next Tuesday to fully fund TOPS. The simple fact of the matter is, I just told you, the program requires $240 million in state general fund. We're $750 million short. We are very likely to have multiple universities if we don't raise some more revenue and that are going to be on the brink of, if not actually filing for exigency. And it doesn't make sense to me to give kids a scholarship to a university that can't hire the professors to teach the classes they need to graduate. Now, if we raise more revenue, as I've told you I expect to do in a second special session, I would love to fully fund TOPS, just like I would love to fully fund our healthcare needs and keep our private partners in our charity hospitals and fully fund higher education and the Department of Children and Family Services and our corrections and all the other many needs we have. Now, the exact amount of, we are obviously going to increase the state general fund that we're going to put towards TOPS, but it will not be the full $240 million needed to fully fund it. Simply, we just don't have it. And the announcement as to how much of that will come on Tuesday. Now, with respect to the bills, I do support the approach that Senator Morrish and Representative Landry are taking. As you all may or may not know, LOSFA promulgated a rule, and I don't think they anticipated an extreme shortfall in an appropriation to fund TOPS, but the way the rule reads, if we don't appropriate enough money to fund TOPS, rather than having a pro rata distribution of the revenue that is available, you fund every scholarship in full, but you start at the top with the highest ACT scores, and you work your way down until you run out of money. And that would, if all you did was, and you all have heard me say this, if the only money going towards TOPS is the $60 million from the tobacco settlement, then you would fund top scholarships for 28 ACT scores and above. And of course, for every increment of general fund that we add to that, that lowers that ACT score that's required. I think the better approach is probably to do the pro rata distribution so that you are not cutting people off completely. And at the end of the day, should we remain short in funding TOPS, I would hope that we're funding it to the point where those individuals can either enroll for the first time if they're a new TOPS recipient, or re-enroll based on the amount of money that they will be getting. So I do support the bills in that regard.
So in the budget, will you be saying we expect to try to fully fund TOPS if more money is raised?
I will not say that in the budget, because the budget is no place to do contingent funding. That's a problem that we've gotten into in the past. Now, I will make public statements like I'm doing right now, and there may well be a second document that is given from Jay Darden to the leaders of the legislature as to what additional revenue we believe ought to be raised in a second special session, and how we would seek to incorporate that into the budget. Because make no mistake, the budget presentation on Tuesday is going to be very sobering. It is going to be very tough. $750 million remains an awful lot of money, and it's a big percentage of what we have in terms of state general fund in the state of Louisiana. And it's going to be impossible to fashion a budget that adequately funds what the overwhelming majority of people in Louisiana believe to be critical priorities. And So there is no denying that. What you're going to see Tuesday is not a budget proposal that resembles anything that I want to do. It's a budget proposal that responds to my constitutional obligation to deliver a balanced budget. And that will take into account only the recognized revenue from REC. And so there won't be contingent funding within the budget document itself.
Governor, we're now finishing up 4 weeks into your first regular session as governor. I was kind of curious how you feel about the pace of things.
Well, first of all, I like having a 3-month regular session instead of a 3-week special session because it is, while we have an awful lot that's going on and it keeps everyone busy, the pace allows for more discussion. It allows for more meetings and collaboration, which is what I've told the people of Louisiana I really wanted to do. And so we're taking advantage of that. And typically, the end of the session is where you see most of the more contentious legislation and that sort of thing. So, I'm happy with where we are at this point in the regular session. Certainly not happy about the circumstances that we're having to deal with, but in terms of the way people are working together, I will tell you that I'm very well satisfied.
You talked about collaboration, you also talked about contention. How are the relationships going with, as they've been referred to, the disciples of no, the committee of no? Are you getting any pushback from them specifically, or feeling that there's still the rabid animosity there was?
Well, I'll leave it for you to determine whether there was animosity between them and me or between, whether it was their reception to certain policy initiatives. Clearly, I remain engaged. I'm talking to everyone, trying to work through differences and find that common ground. I committed to putting Louisiana first and not being primarily a Democrat. I'm asking other folks not to be primarily Democrats or Republicans, but let's all be Louisianans. And so in practice, it looks like people sitting down and in good faith having conversations, exploring where the differences are and where the common interest is and that sort of thing. I will tell you that I'm optimistic about our ability to work together. Now, I'm not naive. There's a group of folks down there that if I propose it, they seem to receive it, poorly, and are not likely to support it. I understand that. It's unfortunate, but the good news is that's a very small percentage of folks. Sometimes they get more attention than they may deserve simply because they're noisy.
Governor, can you explain a little more about the intervention request that was filed in the coastal lawsuits? What, are you seeking to, do those take a position on where you'd like to see those lawsuits go, or what's the purpose of filing that? Because I know the Attorney General's office has gotten involved in this.
Well, the reason is it's some of the in terms of just the policy of the state of Louisiana to make sure that the recoveries are spent on coastal restorations. It is extremely important. We know that right now 3 parishes have filed lawsuits. The Attorney General has intervened into those lawsuits as well. 3 parishes filed lawsuits. It's 39 lawsuits. And now the Attorney General has intervened and the Department of Natural Resources. I think it's incredibly important because what we know is that the parishes filed lawsuits not just in their name but also in the name of the state of Louisiana. And so when these lawsuits are concluded, whether it's by judgment or by settlement or however they're concluded, the state of Louisiana is barred by res judicata from ever going back and trying to correct something that may go wrong. And so our one shot to make sure that this is done right and that our interests are adequately served by these lawsuits is in intervening. And primarily that is making sure that whatever resolution is achieved is satisfactory both in terms of the amount of compensation that is paid, how that compensation might be structured going into the future, and making sure that the money that is supposed to go to coastal restoration actually goes to coastal restoration. So I don't believe we have a choice other than to intervene, and the law specifically lists the Department of Natural Resources as an agency that has standing to bring those lawsuits in the first place.
So is DNR not your office?
Correct.
One last question. That's it.
When, as far as the special session, are you thinking it would start at the end of June, or would you wait till July? Or what about some of the talk of, well, let's see what keeps happening with oil prices and wait until the fall?
Well, I don't know that we can wait till the fall under any circumstance. But, I mean, Jeff, your question is a good one. It's a little bit premature. We're going to have the second special session as soon as I'm convinced that the conditions have been set for success. It doesn't make any sense to have them before that. And that's going to be determined based on how the conversations that I have, both with the leadership in the House and the Senate, but also with the rank and file members, and whether it's enough to go through the budgeting exercise, or, hopefully individuals will look at the budget as it's presented on Tuesday, and as they get testimony from all the agency heads and from people from around the state of Louisiana, and determine that more revenue is necessary so that we can do it sooner than later. The later we wait to get the additional revenue, the more unstable the state of Louisiana is. And it is always harder to reopen a closed facility than it is to keep it open to begin with. So it would be my hope and expectation that we can move forward. And don't lose sight of the fact that Moody's already downgraded our credit worthiness. This week, Fitch's did that as well. So it was hardly an endorsement of the way in which the state handled its business during the special session. We simply have to do better, and doing better, I believe, means a second special session.
Quick follow-up, you concerned about, and I guess we'll have to wait till we get to that point, about session fatigue?
I'm not as concerned about having lawmakers do their jobs as I am about visiting pain on the people of Louisiana. Thank y'all.